I was falsely accused by my girlfriend's best friend. It took a year for the truth to finally set me free. Listen, I never thought I'd be writing something like this on the internet, but here we are. My name's Alex, and this whole mess started about 18 months ago when I was dating Sarah. We'd been together for almost 3 years, living together for the last year and a half, and honestly, I thought we were solid. Sarah had this best friend, Michelle, who I'd known since we started dating. Michelle was always around, which was fine at first, but looking back, I should have seen the red flags way earlier. Michelle was one of those people who thrived on drama. She'd always have some crisis going on, some guy treating her badly, some work situation blowing up. Sarah would drop everything to help her, and I get it, that's what friends do. But Michelle had this way of inserting herself into our relationship that made me uncomfortable. She'd make comments about how Sarah deserved better, how she should be more independent, stuff like that. I mentioned it to Sarah a few times, but she'd just brush it off saying Michelle was protective. The thing is, Michelle worked at this upscale restaurant downtown as a server, and she was always talking about the rich guys who would hit on her. She'd brag about the tips she'd get, the expensive gifts some regulars would try to give her. I always thought it was mostly fantasy, you know? Like she was exaggerating to make herself seem more desirable or whatever. Boy, was I wrong about a lot of things. So here's where everything went sideways. One Thursday evening in March, I'm at home waiting for Sarah to get back from her girls' night out with Michelle and their friend Jenna. Sarah comes home around 11 p.m., which was normal, but she seemed off. Not angry exactly, but distant, cold. I asked if everything was okay, and she just said she was tired and went straight to bed without even kissing me goodnight. The next morning, I wake up and Sarah's already gone. She'd left a note saying she had to go into work early, which was weird because it was Friday and she usually worked from home on Fridays. I tried calling her around lunch, but she didn't pick up. When she finally came home that evening, she looked like she'd been crying. That's when she dropped the bomb on me. Apparently, Michelle had pulled her aside during their night out and told her that I'd been hitting on her for months. According to Michelle's story, I'd been texting her inappropriate messages, making moves when Sarah wasn't around, and had even tried to kiss her the week before when I'd stopped by the restaurant to pick up takeout for Sarah and me. I was completely floored. I mean, what do you even say to something like that? I told Sarah it was absolutely not true, that Michelle was lying, but I could see in her eyes that she was already believing it. Michelle had apparently shown her some text messages as proof, though Sarah wouldn't show them to me. She said she needed space to think about everything. The next few weeks were absolute hell. Sarah moved into the guest bedroom and barely spoke to me. When she did talk to me, it was cold, accusatory. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments about trust and loyalty. I kept trying to defend myself, but every conversation turned into an argument. Michelle, meanwhile, was playing the victim perfectly. She'd come over to support Sarah, shooting me these smug looks when Sarah wasn't watching. I tried everything I could think of to prove my innocence. I offered to show Sarah my phone, my social media, anything she wanted to see. But apparently, Michelle had convinced her that I was smart enough to delete evidence. I suggested we all sit down together and hash it out, but Michelle refused, saying it would be too traumatic for her to confront her harasser directly. The worst part was watching Sarah turn against me. This woman I'd loved for 3 years, who I'd been planning to propose to, was looking at me like I was some kind of predator. Our mutual friends started taking sides. Most of them believed Sarah's version because, honestly, why would Michelle make something like that up? It's not like she had anything obvious to gain from it. Things got worse when Michelle started spreading the story to other people. Suddenly, I'm getting weird looks at the gym we all went to, at the coffee shop where we'd hang out on weekends. People who'd known me for years were treating me like I was some kind of creep. It was humiliating and infuriating at the same time. After about a month of this Cold War, Sarah finally said she wanted to talk. I thought maybe she'd come to her senses, realized that Michelle was lying. Instead, she told me she couldn't trust me anymore and that our relationship was over. She said she needed to believe her friend, and that even if there was a chance Michelle was lying, she couldn't take the risk of staying with someone who might betray her. I begged her to reconsider, to at least investigate the claims more thoroughly. I pointed out inconsistencies in Michelle's story, like how I supposedly tried to kiss her at the restaurant when there were cameras and witnesses everywhere, how the timing of some of the alleged incidents didn't match up with when I was actually there. But Sarah had made up her mind. She said she'd already started looking for a new apartment and would be moving out within the week. The breakup was devastating. Not just because I lost Sarah, but because I lost my whole social circle too. Most of our friends sided with her, which I understood but still hurt like hell. I was suddenly completely isolated, branded as this cheating, harassing asshole in a community where everyone knew everyone else. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the pain. I was working as a software developer for a mid-sized tech company, and my boss, Robert, noticed I was struggling. He was a good guy, older, divorced himself, and he kind of took me under his wing during those dark months. Having at least one person who didn't automatically assume I was guilty helped keep me sane. About 2 months after Sarah moved out, I had this weird encounter that should have been a bigger red flag than it was. I was at the grocery store, and I ran into Jenna, the third friend from their usual girls' night group. We'd always gotten along well, and I could tell she felt awkward about the whole situation. She pulled me aside and said something that stuck with me. "Alex, I don't know what really happened between you and Michelle, but something about her story never sat right with me. The timing was weird, and she seemed almost excited when she told us about it. Like she was enjoying the drama, you know." I pressed her for more details, but she clammed up, saying she didn't want to get in the middle of it. Still, it was the first hint I'd gotten that maybe not everyone was completely convinced of Michelle's version of events. It gave me a tiny bit of hope that the truth might eventually come out. Around the same time, I started noticing Michelle around places I'd go. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. We lived in the same area, shopped at the same places. But it happened so frequently that it started to feel intentional. She'd be at the coffee shop when I went for my morning run, at the bookstore when I was browsing on weekends. Every time, she'd give me this look that was part smug, part challenging, like she was daring me to say something. The first crack in Michelle's story came about 6 months after the breakup. I was at a bar with Robert and a few other co-workers, just trying to have a normal Friday night, when this guy named Marcus approached me. I didn't recognize him at first, but he introduced himself as someone who worked with Michelle at the restaurant. Marcus looked nervous, like he wasn't sure he should be talking to me. He said he'd heard about what had happened between Michelle and me through the restaurant gossip mill. Then he dropped this bombshell. Michelle had apparently bragged to some of the other servers about getting rid of her friend's boyfriend because she thought Sarah deserved better. According to Marcus, Michelle had said something like, "Sarah's too good for that loser. I did what I had to do to open her eyes." He said it had made him uncomfortable at the time, but he hadn't really understood what she meant until he heard more details about the accusations against me. I was stunned. Here was someone with no reason to lie, no connection to me or Sarah, telling me that Michelle had essentially confessed to framing me. But when I asked if he'd be willing to tell Sarah what he'd heard, Marcus backpedaled. He said he couldn't get involved, that he needed his job, and that it would be his word against Michelle's anyway. It was frustrating, but at least I knew I wasn't crazy. There was actual evidence that Michelle had orchestrated this whole thing, even if I couldn't prove it yet. Over the next few months, I started quietly investigating Michelle's claims. I went back through my phone records, my credit card statements, anything that could provide an alibi for the time she said I'd made advances. I even went to the restaurant and asked to see their security footage from the day she claimed I tried to kiss her, but they said they only kept footage for 30 days. I also started reaching out to people who might have witnessed my interactions with Michelle. My neighbor Tom remembered seeing Michelle at our apartment building several times when Sarah wasn't home, times that didn't match up with her story about me pursuing her. My coworker Lisa remembered me complaining about Michelle's drama and how she was affecting my relationship with Sarah. The more I dug, the more I realized that Michelle's story had holes in it. But I also realized that even if I could prove she was lying, it might be too late. Sarah had moved on, was dating someone new according to mutual friends. The damage to my reputation in our social circle was already done. The breakthrough came almost a year after the initial accusation, and it came from the last person I expected, Michelle herself. Apparently, she'd been drinking heavily at a restaurant Christmas party and got into an argument with another server, a girl named Kathy. The argument was about some guy they were both interested in, and Michelle got nasty. In her drunken rage, Michelle started bragging about how she was good at getting what she wanted, how she'd proven it by breaking up Sarah and me. She apparently went into detail about how she'd fabricated the text messages, how she timed her revelation for maximum impact, how easy it had been to manipulate Sarah's insecurities about our relationship. The whole thing was overheard by multiple people, including Marcus, who finally felt guilty enough to reach out to me with the full story. This time, he was willing to talk because there were other witnesses who could back him up. Armed with this information, I had to make a difficult decision. Part of me wanted to immediately call Sarah and tell her everything. But another part of me wondered if it was worth reopening old wounds. I'd spent months in therapy learning to move on, to build a life without her. Did I really want to drag us both back through that pain? I decided I owed it to myself, and to Sarah, to at least let her know the truth. I called her, and after some awkward small talk, I told her I had something important to discuss about Michelle. She was reluctant at first, but she agreed to meet me for coffee. When I told her what I'd learned, Sarah's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't immediately apologize or break down crying. Instead, she got quiet for a long time, then said something that floored me. I think part of me always knew something was off about Michelle's story, but I was too hurt and angry to admit it. She explained that in the months after our breakup, she'd started noticing inconsistencies in things Michelle would say. Michelle would reference conversations and events that didn't quite match up with Sarah's memories. She'd also become increasingly possessive of Sarah's time, getting jealous when Sarah started dating again. Sarah decided she needed to confront Michelle directly. I wasn't sure this was a good idea, but Sarah said she needed closure, needed to hear the truth from Michelle's own mouth. She arranged to meet Michelle for lunch, and with Michelle's permission, she recorded the conversation on her phone. What happened next was better than I could have hoped for. When Sarah pressed Michelle about the inconsistencies in her story, Michelle initially tried to stick to her lies. But when Sarah mentioned that witnesses had heard Michelle bragging about breaking us up, Michelle cracked. She admitted everything. The fake text messages, the lies about me hitting on her, the calculated timing of her revelation. Her justification was that she thought I wasn't good enough for Sarah, that Sarah deserved someone with more ambition, more money. She'd convinced herself that she was doing Sarah a favor by getting rid of me. The recording was damning. Michelle not only confessed to lying about me, but she also revealed the depth of her manipulation. She'd been subtly undermining our relationship for months before making her false accusation, planting seeds of doubt about my commitment, my faithfulness, my worthiness as a partner. When Sarah played me the recording, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because finally, I had proof that I'd been telling the truth all along. Sadness because of all the time and trust that had been lost, all the pain we'd both endured because of one person's selfish manipulation. Sarah broke down crying after we listened to the recording together. She apologized over and over, saying she should have believed me, should have investigated more thoroughly before ending our relationship. I appreciated the apology, but honestly, I wasn't sure if sorry was enough. The damage Michelle had done went beyond just breaking up Sarah and me. She'd isolated me from friends, damaged my reputation, caused me months of depression and anxiety. She'd also hurt Sarah, manipulating her emotions and destroying her trust in her own judgment. We decided together that we needed to let our mutual friends know the truth. Sarah sent the recording to several people who had taken sides during our breakup. The reactions were mixed. Some people were appropriately horrified and apologetic. Others seemed uncomfortable with the revelation, like they didn't want to admit they'd been wrong about me. I considered taking legal action against Michelle for defamation, but my lawyer advised against it. She said that while I probably had a case, it would be expensive and time-consuming, and the damage to my reputation was mostly limited to a social circle I was no longer part of. She also pointed out that Michelle didn't have much money to pay damages even if I won. Instead, I decided to focus on rebuilding. I'd already started making new friends through work and hobbies. I'd been seeing a therapist who helped me process the trauma of being falsely accused and ostracized. Taking legal action would just drag me back into the drama I'd been working so hard to move past. Sarah and I talked about whether we wanted to try to rebuild our relationship. We'd both grown and changed during our time apart. She'd learned to be more independent, to trust her own judgment instead of being so easily influenced by others. I'd learned to set better boundaries and to value the friends who stood by me during difficult times. Ultimately, we decided that too much had happened for us to go back to what we had before. The trust between us had been broken, not just by Michelle's lies, but by Sarah's willingness to believe them without giving me a fair chance to defend myself. We cared about each other, but we weren't the same people who had been in love 3 years earlier. We parted ways amicably, with mutual respect and forgiveness, but also with the understanding that some things can't be undone. I was glad to have closure, glad that the truth had finally come out, but I wasn't interested in trying to resurrect a relationship that had been built on a foundation that proved to be less solid than we'd thought. Looking back on this whole experience, I've learned some valuable lessons about trust, friendship, and the power of manipulation. I learned that some people will lie and scheme for the pettiest reasons, and that even people who love you can be turned against you under the right circumstances. I also learned the importance of having a strong support system of people who know your character well enough to give you the benefit of the doubt when accusations fly. Robert, my boss, and a few other friends who stuck by me during the worst of it proved to be worth their weight in gold. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the truth does come out, but it doesn't always fix everything. Michelle's lies cost me a relationship, friendships, and months of my life. Even though everyone eventually learned the truth, I couldn't get that time back, couldn't undo the pain and stress I'd endured. As for Michelle, she ended up leaving the restaurant and moving to another city after word got out about what she'd done. Last I heard, she was working at some corporate job and keeping a lower profile. I hope she learned something from the experience, but honestly, I don't really care. She's not my problem anymore. These days, I'm in a much better place. I've got a new group of friends who know my whole story and accept me for who I am. I'm dating again, though I'm definitely more cautious about the people I let into my inner circle. I still work with Robert, who's become not just a mentor but a genuine friend. I moved to a different neighborhood, partially to get away from the memories, but mostly just for a fresh start. I've got a nice apartment, a dog named Charlie, and a life that feels authentically mine rather than something built around someone else's expectations or manipulations. The experience changed me, no doubt about it. I'm less trusting, more guarded, but also more confident in my own judgment. I know who I am and what I'm capable of, and I won't let anyone else's lies or manipulations make me doubt that again. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this story, it's that false accusations can happen to anyone, and the damage they cause can last long after the truth comes out. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're hearing accusations about someone you care about, please take the time to investigate thoroughly before making judgments. Don't just assume the accuser is telling the truth because they seem sincere or because they're your friend. And if you ever find yourself in my position, falsely accused and watching your life fall apart, know that it's not permanent. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, and when it does, the people who really matter will recognize it. Focus on the friends who stand by you, get professional help if you need it, and remember that other people's lies don't define who you are. It's been a long journey, but I'm finally at peace with how everything played out. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, but I can't deny that it made me stronger, more resilient, and more appreciative of the genuine people in my life.